Greetings and salutations, everybody. My name is E. Spencer Kyte, your friendly neighborhood Spencer man. I am here. This is my first video for officially for SevereMMA. So before I get into one question for every fight, I want to just introduce myself a little bit to the people that are hearing me, seeing me for the first time. A little introduction, a little get to know the new guy here on the platform. For the last 13 years, I have been covering this sport of mixed martial arts. For the duration of that, for the most part, I wrote for myself under the Keyboard Kimura banner. It was a blog. It moved to a newspaper here in Vancouver, the province. It went back to being a blog. A couple of years ago, I turned it into a Substack newsletter. And over the last year, I really started connecting with the guys here at SevereMMA. I was invited to do the preview shows, the UFC weekly preview shows that we do with Ian and Harry and Sean and Denny back in the day, and Andy a couple of times back in the day and stuff like that. Shawnee was inviting me on to do some of the State of the UFC podcasts. Harry and I ended up teaming up over on my newsletter to do the next day takeaways, where we put out about 20 episodes of that. And over the course of this year, I've developed this relationship with the guys here. And so when we were taping an episode of Speaker's Corner last week for the SevereMMA Patreon, which you all should be subscribed to by now, it's terrific. Both Sean and Harry said, look, it would make a lot of sense if you just brought all of your content to SevereMMA. It's a bigger platform. We'd love to have you. You're already sort of, a special guest star, if you will. So why not just make this official? I took less than 24 hours to mull it over because it does make a whole lot of sense for me to be here. As I said, I have this relationship with these guys. You see me here throughout the week anyways, in terms of, doing the preview show and things like that. And so I wanted to bring my content to everybody here, make it part of our content at SevereMMA. And so what that's going to mean is that every fight week, I will be here doing different videos. I will be doing different posts. I will be doing different features. On the weekends, after events, Harry and I will resume doing the next day takeaways. Although this weekend, it's going to be Harry and Ian O'Neill. I have some prior engagements that I have to take care of. But yeah, and then on off weeks, there'll be a lot of content from me still. I love what I do. I love putting out digital content. In every form, in every facet, whether that's just audio, whether that's video, whether that's written stuff. I know not a lot of people necessarily want to sit and read 2,000 word pieces like my debut piece for SevereMMA on Safe Salute of Fortis MMA. Please go check that out now on the website. But it's still a thing I love to do. And I really do enjoy sitting down with athletes, with coaches, having those discussions, having those conversations, putting profiles together, writing features, all these different things. So those are the things you will come to expect from me here. You will come to get from me here on SevereMMA, on the YouTube page, on the main website itself, on all the social platforms. Harry's going to push me to do TikTok. And for some reason, I just can't say no. When he figures out another thing that we should try, I say, yeah, sure, let's do it. So there will probably be some Spencer Kyte TikToks coming in the near future. But for right now, for this Wednesday, we are one question for every fight for UFC Vegas. So if this is your first time checking me out, checking this series out, here's what we do. I, for the longest time, kind of forever have been the guy that said, look, I think every fight matters. I think it's a thing where we should talk about every fight that's going on and every competitor on the card, because at some point, these people down the card are going to become stars. Some of them might become stars, right? There was a point not that long ago where every UFC champion, their career started on the prelims. And I feel like we're in a point right now at times where prelims get overlooked. So this was more than a year ago. I said, I want to talk about every fight. And if I'm the guy that's going to advocate for it, if I'm the guy that's going to say all of these fights matter, put your money where your mouth is, write about every one of these fights. And I came up with this kind of idea to address one question that I have for every single fight on the card. And so this weekend, UFC Vegas 62 takes place at the UFC Apex. We're just going to get into it. This is This is what we will do fight weeks on Wednesdays. We'll go top to bottom, main event to the opener. There's something intriguing about every fight, at least to me, and I will share those things with you here. So here we go. Main event, Alexa Grasso and Viviane Araujo in the flyweight division. My question is whether either of these women will be a legitimate contender going forward. Grasso's 3-0 since moving to featherweight. Araujo's coming off her best showing yet against Andrea Lee. Got rocked early and then instantly turned it around and turned it into a wrestling match. Had a lot of success in that fight. Looked very, very good. Current champ Valentina Shevchenko certainly needs challengers. We know that. She's beaten the top 4 of the top 5 fighters currently ranked in the division. We don't know what's happening with her. We don't know whether she's going to rematch Taila Santos. And so this is an opportunity, and we talked about this on the preview show that'll come out in the next day or two, that either one of these ladies, either one of these women can really go out there and make a case for themselves by having a dynamic performance. But my question is more, will either of these women be able to be more than just sort of a warm body opposite Shevchenko? Because I think that's on the table, and that's no disrespect to some of the warm bodies that have been opposite Valentina Shevchenko at times. But I think we've seen flashes from each of them that they might be capable of going out there and having some success. We saw sort of a lot of dynamic offense from Viviane Araujo last time out. We saw the wrestling. She had good striking. We know all of that. Alexa Grasso is more of a boxer, not as much of a wrestling threat, not as much of a grappling threat, though her last victory was a submission win over Joanne Wood. Sort of more of an opportunistic finish, caught her back coming off a bounce off the fence, really, to get that finish. But certainly someone that can potentially present some challenges by being a pressure fighter, by having good boxing, by being a good counter striker in there. Be interesting to see what each of these women could feasibly, at the best of their abilities, bring to Valentina Shevchenko. And I ask that question today going into this weekend because I do think this weekend's fight will help answer that, will help clarify whether they are the next people to get fed to the champion or whether they are a contender that can follow sort of in the line of Taila Santos and maybe disrupt things a little bit, maybe have some success, maybe push Shevchenko a little bit. Because I do believe that whoever wins this fight will be sort of in pole position to challenge for the title. We may see Taila Santos again. We may see Shevchenko go up and face Amanda Nunes. We don't know. But all either of these women can do is control their own destiny. And a strong outing from either one will put them sort of at the top of the list, at least for me, and most likely for the UFC as well. And then from there, who knows, right? But if either of these women go out and have a truly dynamic performance, go out and get an early finish, go out and just dominate over 5 rounds, that's going to change the discussion about a potential fight with Valentina Shevchenko. And I would like that to be, that's at the forefront of my mind going into Saturday. I think it's something a lot of people should be thinking about as we move forward towards the weekend. Co-main event of the evening, Cub Swanson makes his bantamweight debut against Jonathan Dragon Martinez. My question is, how does Swanson's power and overall offense translate at 135 pounds? So up at 45, where Cub Swanson has spent the bulk of his career, he's shown good power. He has a dynamic offensive arsenal, right? Cub Swanson is one of those guys that can do everything well. Dangerous everywhere. He's got power to put you out. Last time out, he knocked out or he finished Darren Elkins with a spinning kick and then, pounded him out on the ground. Darren Elkins not an easy guy to get out of there. So clearly he has the arsenal and the weaponry to be successful. The part to me that's interesting about this fight, we often talk when fighters make the move down in weight that they're looking to do so or they're doing so in hopes of being the bigger athlete, right? Having that size advantage, having that physicality advantage. What I want to see from Cub Swanson as he goes down and is certainly going to be the slower guy. He's 39. He's almost 39. He's been doing this for a long, long time. He's not the explosive athlete that he was earlier in his career. And he's certainly not the explosive athlete these 28-year-olds and like Jonathan Martinez that he's facing are at this point. But how does the power translate? Power is the last thing that goes. And Cub Swanson has always had it in spades. He's always had an abundance of it. And so can he go down there and instead of necessarily just being the bigger guy, because I do think he'll still be a little bit bigger than most of these guys, he's a decent size for a featherweight. Can he go down there and be the stronger guy and be the guy that brings a little bit more pop to a division where, yes, we see finishes, but it's not often straight knockout finishes, right? We see a lot of creative finishes. We see a lot of dynamic finishes. You think of Corey Sandhagen and some of the things he's done. Petr Yan following up with stuff and sort of running through guys through accumulated damage, right? Sean O'Malley has had a couple walk-off hits. Can Cub Swanson go down and bring some of that to the table? I don't know how long this run goes. I don't know whether Cub sees this as, I've got 3, 4, 5 fights left, or whether he thinks he's got far more than that. But power's the last thing that goes. And I want to see if he can go down there and carry over that power, if that can be the difference maker for him as he begins this new chapter of his career. We move to flyweight. Man, this is a great fight. Brandon Royval versus Askarov. My question here is sort of a tip of the cap to Harry Powell, and it's simply chaos or order. If we get a chaotic fight, it certainly favors Brandon Royval, who is just a Tasmanian devil in there. He dives on submissions. He throws everything from every angle without setups, without thought. It's just fluid and frenetic and chaotic. And he's very good. The only losses in his career are to Brandon Moreno and Alexandre Pantoja. The Moreno loss partially because he separated his shoulder in that first round saying before getting finished doesn't do him justice. He separated his shoulder. Brandon Moreno started hitting him and he tapped out because he had a separated shoulder. He's a very good fighter. He's a top 5 fighter in this division. I think he may even just be sitting currently at number 6 in the division, but he's a legitimate contender. If we get a more technical fight, it favors Askarov. He is the more fundamentally sound. He is the more polished of the two. And he's also coming in off his first loss. And so this is going to be a question to me and a fight to me where everything sort of hinges on which one of these two guys is more able to draw their opponent into their style. Can Brandon Royval go out there and drag Askarov into something chaotic? Can he bring him into the storm and just say, look, we're having this fight that is all over the map, full of scrambles, full of chaos, and just see what happens? Or will Askarov simply dictate the terms of engagement and say, no, man, we're fighting on my terms. I'm sticking this jab in your face. I'm hitting these level changes. I'm grappling for stretches. I'm not letting you get into your chaos bag. We're not doing the wild raw dog all over the octagon thing. Whoever, and it sounds simplistic, and I'm sure there will be people that say like, hey man, really great analysis. Whoever dictates the terms of engagement is going to win the fight. But this is one of those instances where that rings so true because they are such divergent styles, because they are such different approaches that these two guys are going to want to offer on Saturday. It's a terrific fight. Flyweight's a little bit backed up right now just in terms of the title picture because we've got the 4th fight with Figueiredo and Moreno coming up. We've got Alexandre Pantoja sitting there waiting for an opportunity when that comes up. He has already beaten both of these guys, so that complicates things a little bit more. But whether there's immediate championship ramifications on this fight or not, it is a terrific fight. It's one of those instances, and I think we talked about this with Askarov's last fight against Kai Kara-France back in March in Columbus when we did the preview show. In terms of skills, in terms of talent, in terms of where they're at in their division, this is a main event worthy fight. This is a fight that could very well be a 25-minute fight that everybody would enjoy. I cannot wait to see it on Saturday. Next fight, a middleweight contest, Dusko Todorovic versus Jordan Wright. My question is, who's getting knocked out and how? So after all of that waxing poetic about the beauty and the terms of engagement for Brandon Royval and Askarov, we get to this fight. And it's simply just the fact that these are two dudes who are middling competitors in Sean Sheehan's least favorite division, the talent depleted middleweight ranks. Neither of them like to go to decisions. Jordan Wright has only seen the second round twice, and neither of those times has it gone past 1 minute. Every single one of his fights has finished inside the distance. Dusko Todorovic doesn't particularly have a fondness for using up all of his allotted time on Saturdays. And so somebody's getting knocked out. And my question, my interest, the thing that piques my curiosity is just seeing who and how. Sometimes it's as simple as that, folks. I will be here and there will be plenty of times that I sit here and I go into some long diatribe about, the skills that somebody brings to the table, or a potential approach that somebody has, or a narrative storyline tied to somebody's career or implications for a division going through one of these fight cards on this series. Sometimes I'll just sit here and tell you, I want to see which one of these dudes gets knocked out and how, because I think it's going to be wild all the way until it happens. And I think how it happens is probably going to be wild because that's the history between these two. So I'm looking forward to it. We move to light heavyweight, Misha Cirkunov versus Alonzo Menifield. What does Cirkunov have left at this point is the thing that I'm looking to have answered on Saturday. I have a bit of a soft spot for Misha Cirkunov. I have covered his career and known him, spoken with him since the very early days of his MMA career. I was at his third fight over on Vancouver Island for Armageddon Fighting Championships way back in the day. We've stayed in touch. I've been at a number of his UFC events. We've spoken throughout his career. So I have a little bit of a always keeping an eye on Misha because I've watched him progress to this point. He was a top 10 light heavyweight at one point, but always sort of struggled against the top guys. He's 3 years removed from his last win. He's 35. And now he's going back to light heavyweight after 2 consecutive losses at middleweight to Krzysztof Jotko and Wellington Turman. But the weird thing is that he's also only 3 years removed from subbing Jimmy Crute real quickly out here in Vancouver. And so it's going to be interesting to me. When he made the decision to move to middleweight, I didn't understand it. I don't think he's I got it from the sense of he feels like he's not an overly big guy at light heavyweight. And he's not as big as some of these guys. You go watch his fight with Ryan Spann, you go watch his fight with Johnny Walker. He's not the biggest fighter in the division. But he had advantages. He had strengths. And I think we'll get back to seeing some of those. But I want to see, just what he's got left. It's been sort of hit and miss for him over the last couple of years in terms of activity. The results haven't been there. He's dealt with some stuff. He and his wife have dealt with some personal stuff outside of the sport. And so I just want to see what he can do against a guy in Alonzo Menifield who has a ton of power, who is a dynamic athlete, but is still green in terms of his overall MMA game, and especially in terms of his grappling game. So this is a spot. If Misha Cirkunov is ever going to dial this back and have some success, this is the spot. And I want to see if he can do that on Saturday. We get to the prelims. Featured prelim is at bantamweight, Brandon Davis versus Mana Martinez. My question is, what kind of impact is training at Glory MMA and Fitness? How about Martinez? So he's gone to Glory for this camp, working under James Krause and working with the crew there. He's someone that was training in Texas with Adrian Yanez and that group. They lost their coach last year, Saul Solis. And so it's a really interesting move. It's really good to see that he's gone to an emerging team, a team that's got a good room, especially of guys in this weight range. People that can show him some things, can help him improve. He's still only a 26-year-old kid. Last time out, he lost to Ronnie Lawrence, but if you remember the fight, if you saw the fight, or you go back and watch it on Fight Pass, he got down early, got down 2 rounds, but came out and was still there in the third, tough as nails, tenacious as hell, and got after Ronnie Lawrence. And it was one of those fights where it sort of felt like if we're going anymore, Ronnie Lawrence gets beat. So there's some defensive things that he needs to clean up. I want to see if James Krause and Jason High and the team out there can help him clean those things up and get moving forward more successfully and more consistently. But he's got all the toughness in the world. He's got good power, especially for this division, and lots of time to grow. So this is an interesting fight. Brandon Davis is a tough veteran who's been around. He hasn't had a ton of success at the UFC, but he's going to be in there. It's not easy to get out of there. So it's a chance for Mana Martinez to go out and potentially have 15 minutes to work to show some of the growth. And if he gets Brendan Davis out of there early, that says something too. Next up, sticking at bantamweight, Raphael Assuncao against Victor Henry. My question is, can Victor Henry make a run at bantamweight? This is another thing we talked about on the preview show, sort of what's the logic behind this pairing? What is the UFC trying to do with this pairing? And the way that I've interpreted it, the way that I've looked at it from the time this fight was announced, was that Victor Henry's 35, so he's not necessarily a guy that you're going to slow play, right? He's not a guy that you're going to put 5, 6, 7 fights in front of him before he gets into that upper tier of the bantamweight division, if he can get there. He had a very good win in January over Hani Barcelos to get his first UFC win. And so now it feels to me like he's taking 2 steps at a time, right? Instead of just having that small progression, we're doing a bit bigger, and we're going in there with a guy that had been a stalwart in the top 15 for much of the time that this division has been around in Assuncao. I understand that he's 40, that he's lost 4 straight. So it's certainly not the same level of challenge. It's certainly not the same caliber of victory it would have been for some of the guys at the start of that run of negative results that Assuncao has had, but a good victory nonetheless. It's still a win that means something, even though he's lost 4 straight and he's 40 years old. This is sort of the thing that Victor Henry is going to have to do because he is 35, because he has spent a number of years fighting abroad, fighting in smaller shows, working his way slowly, eventually getting here. And so this to me is, can he go out on Saturday and post another good win over another tough Brazilian veteran and sort of just continue to hit those turbos, right? Can he continue to take those big steps forward and get into a position where his third fight is against somebody maybe just outside the top 15, in that second 15, at the top of that second 15 even. You know, he beat Kyler Phillips back in the day. That's sort of the guy I'm thinking about, someone in that range. Or can he look so good that they just say, you know what, let's try him against one of these guys in the lower third of the top 15, because the timeline, because the window is so condensed for him, you get the opportunity to just go forward a little bit quicker. I think that's what the thinking is with making this pairing. And I want to see if Victor Henry can take advantage of that on Saturday night. Move to middleweight, Nick Maximov versus Jacob Malkoun. How does Maximov respond, to his first career loss? So he started his career 8-0. First 2 fights in the UFC, he gets a victory over Cody Brundage, who took the fight on short notice. Then he gets a split decision win over Punahele Soriano in a fight where it was pretty grappling heavy. But Nick Maximov is a guy that his grappling style is more the suffocate and keep you in positions approach than necessarily the hunting for submissions, scrambling, transitioning through positions, making, putting you on the defensive. It's more of a just get you here and hold you here kind of thing. And so then he goes out last time and Andre Petrosky actually just runs through him, chokes him out, puts him to sleep in like 70 seconds. And so here's a 24-year-old kid that has had a little bit of attention because he comes from the Diaz Academy. He comes from that sort of Stockton lineage. Malkoun isn't a world beater, but he's had some success. He's 2-2 in the UFC. He had 2 good wins where he out-wrestled Abdul Razak Al Hassan and AJ Dobson. And so Saturday for me is almost it's not quite make or break because he's 24 years old. But this is the fight to me that's going to tell me what I need to know about Nick Maximov. If he's somebody I need to continue to pay attention to and keep watching and keep looking for signs of growth, he's going to have a good outing on Saturday, and he's going to beat Jacob Malkoun, and we're going to see a little more. It's not just going to be take you down and hold you down. It's going to be take you down, advance into dominant positions, find a submission, and get you out of there. If he loses, he becomes one of those guys that, yep, still on the periphery because that age, because you're always going to hear from him and hear about him because of the 209 connect, but maybe not as much attention, maybe not as much interest as he's garnered to this point. Next up, Joanderson, Brito, and Lucas Alexandre in the featherweight division. Question here is, what does Brito do as an encore? So he lost his debut in January against Bill Algeo in one of those fights that at the time I said, look, these are the kind of matchups I wanted to see for the graduates from the Contender Series from last year, because a lot of them came in with shiny records against marginal competition. And so he loses that fight, which sort of sets a bit of a baseline. But then he goes out in his next fight and he beats Andre Fili in 41 seconds. And a win over Andre Fili is a very good win. You don't beat Andre Fili if you don't have upside in this division. Now, we've subsequently had a situation created where Bill Algeo beats Joanderson Brito. Joanderson Brito beats Andre Fili, and Andre Fili beats Bill Algeo. So we've got that weird MMA math love triangle going on where these guys have all fought each other and all beaten each other, but such is the things that happen. And so this fight was originally supposed to be against Melsik Bagdasaryan, another graduate from the Contender Series last year. It feels like a bit of a backward step after getting a quick dynamic finish over Andre Fili, who was in the top 15 at times and sort of lives in that second 15 and is kind of the veteran test for anybody, for guys like Brito that are looking to move forward. So it's weird that he's gone a little bit backwards after passing that test with flying colors earlier this year. Lucas Alexander steps in. This is one of those things to me where if Brito is the real deal, full caps, then he goes out and he has the kind of performance that Sadiq Youssef had a couple weeks back against Don Shainis, where here's this guy that's coming in on short notice. He's got 5 days or 6 days or whatever it is to get ready for me. I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to have the same kind of performance I had against Andre Fili, because if I can do that to Fili, I can do it to this guy that hasn't had a chance to get ready. I don't know if it's going to happen. It's what I'd like to see happen, and it's why I'm interested in this fight. Short notice fights like this that get thrown together sort of the week of fight week are always difficult. It's always more taxing to me on the fighter that was already in camp, that was supposed to be there, especially when you're someone like Sadiq Youssef a couple weeks ago, like Joanderson Brito this weekend. And so I just want to see how he handles it. Next up, women's strawweight, Sam Hughes versus Piera Rodriguez. My question here is, has the move to Dallas and Fortis MMA unlocked things for Sam Hughes? Now, if you follow the website, you know that my debut piece for SevereMMA was a sit-down profile on Saif Saud, the owner and head coach and leader and general at Fortis MMA, talking about his journey in the sport, how he built the team, sort of the principles that he runs the team with, and things of that nature. We touched on Sam Hughes a little bit, that she is one of the few people that has just sort of not been raised under the Fortis MMA banner, but come there this year and had success. She started her UFC career with a short notice loss to Tisha Torres. She suffered an eye injury. Fight ends at the end of the first round. Then it's 2 straight decision losses, one to Loma Lukbunmi, the other to Luana Pinheiro. Stumbling over my L's here. But since then, and since going down to Dallas, which she moved to for family reasons, she moved to the Dallas area for personal reasons, and connected with the crew at Fortis, in part to be a training partner with Jin Hugh Fryer. That was sort of the this is why this will work. We have Jin Hugh Fry here. Sam can be a training partner. They can train with each other. This is good for both. Let's do it. And she's looked good. She went out and got a majority decision win over Estela Nunez in her first fight with Saif Saud in her corner. She got a 3rd round stoppage win over Elise Reed in her 2nd fight. And I just want to see if this is the start of something, if this is really a little run, because Sam Hughes is someone that I was interested in as she reached the UFC. Not necessarily that Tecia Torres fight, because that's a nightmare assignment right out of the gate. But she's a former D1 track athlete. She's got the work ethic. She's got everything I've ever heard about her from people I've talked to, and even talking from her. She's in this. She's committed. She's an athlete. She's got the work ethic. She's got the drive. She's got the focus. She's just needed, it feels, somebody to help her unlock that. It seems like Safe Saud has done that. I want to see if that carries over on Saturday, because Piera Rodriguez is undefeated. She's tough as they come. She looked great in earning her contract on the Contender Series. She looked very good in beating Kay Hansen in her debut. This is a huge test for Sam Hughes, and it will tell us whether this is somebody that's going forward and has found something at Fortis, or if, I mean, it doesn't even necessarily, if she loses, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not that she's found something at Fortis. It could just mean that Piera Rodriguez is better than her and someone that's on the way up in this division. But it's a very interesting fight. I have some questions. This is one of them, and I can't wait to see it on Saturday. 2 fights left. We get to flyweight Tatsura Taira against CJ Vergara. My question here is, what kind of improvements do we see from Taira? He is my fighter to watch this week. That piece probably came out by the time you're listening to this or watching this. You can go over to SevereMMA.com and check out the Fighter to Watch series, which I tend to put out on Tuesdays of fight week. I mean, it's 5 months plus a day since his UFC debut, which was a unanimous decision win over Carlos Candelario. He's 22 years old. He showed a ton of promise in that first fight. He's undefeated. And now he's had time to go back and look at that tape, work on the things that there's clearly room to improve. And he gets another fight here against Vergara that is kind of the perfect little incremental step up. This is one of those divisions where we don't need to rush a 22-year-old emerging fighter, undefeated fighter. He can take the time to take these little steps and beat a Candelario and then face a CJ Vergara, who's 1-1 in the UFC and coming off a tough, hard-fought win over Cleidson Rodriguez. For a guy like Taira, I keep screwing up his name. I'll figure it out at some point. Got to reach out to Anik to get the audio files to know exactly how to pronounce it, or go back and listen to it on the broadcast. These are the fights and these are the moments at this age, at this stage of his career, where I want to see, even if they're little progressions every fight. So I want to see a little bit more sustained pressure if he's on top, or commitment to either hunting a submission or throwing strikes. He had Carlos Candelario in some bad positions in that debut, but sort of couldn't commit either way. He'd hunt for a choke for a little bit, and then he'd throw some punches, or he'd throw some elbows, and then he'd hunt for a choke again. And if he'd committed either way, especially to the punches, and this is the shout to Harry that always will come in this, especially to the punches and elbows when he's got Candelario belly down and unable to defend things, he probably gets a finish. There was a point that Mike Beltran, the referee, was looking on very intently, and if he just keeps raining down elbows, Mike probably has no choice but to step in and stop the fight. But that's not how it played out. And I just want to see on Saturday if he gets into a similar position. Has he learned from that fight? Have they gone back and drilled that and said, look, when we get here, we need to do X, Y, and Z. We need to pick one path and stick to it rather than play on both sides. Vergara is a tough out. He's a 31-year-old tough competitor trained by Pete Spratt, former UFC vet, another Contender Series grad. It's a good fight. It's a good step up for Taira, and we'll see what happens. Brings us to the opener, Mike Jackson versus Pete Rodriguez. My question is just, has anyone had a stranger UFC career than Mike the Truth Jackson? He debuted on February 6th, 2016, losing to Mickey Gall in 45 seconds in what was a winner gets CM Punk fight. I was there. I covered that event. It was originally a pay-per-view Then both Cain Velasquez and Fabricio Verdum got hurt. They moved it to, it would have been Fox at the time, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson and Johnny Hendricks. I had already booked things. Everything was paid for. Let's just go. So we went down anyways. It was weird seeing two newcomers at Media Day. It was even weirder still seeing CM Punk there watching the fight, sort of scouting his future opponent. He lost that fight to Mickey Gall, as I said, 45 seconds. And yet 2.5 years later in Chicago at UFC 225, Mike Jackson fights and beats CM Punk. Unanimous decision. It gets overturned because Mike Jackson pops hot for weed afterwards. And then nearly 4 years later, earlier this year, he fights Dean Barry in April, gets kicked low twice, including one that was really bad, and then gets like his eye, just absolutely 2 fingers in the eye socket. It was gross. I watched it back this morning. It's horrible. I didn't need to see that. Gets the DQ win. So going into this one, dude is 37 years old. All of his pro fights have come in the UFC. He's 1-1 with 1 no contest, and he is a massive underdog against Pete Rodriguez, who has all of 1 fight in the UFC, all of 5 fights in his career. His 1 fight in the UFC lasted about 3 minutes, and he got absolutely bashed on by Jack Della Maddalena, who, side note, can't wait to see Della back in the cage. And so it's just like, openers are sometimes weird and sometimes fights that you can just skip, but like I can't look away from this. I can't not pay attention to this because Mike Jackson has just had an absolutely bonkers career to this point. And he's one of those guys for me that, until proven otherwise, I just expect chaos. I expect randomness. I expect weird things to follow him every time he steps into the cage. So I will be planted in my office across the hall, staring at my television when this fight starts, because it's been a weird 3 fights spread out over 6+ years. And I want to see how, I assume, this little 4-fight run in the UFC ends, whether it's victory, whether it's defeat, whether it's chaos, whether it's normalcy. I am so intrigued. I hope you guys check it out on Saturday. That's it for this. That's it for one question. We've gone top to bottom. We'll be back here, back on this platform, doing 10 things I like on Thursday. On Fridays, I generally do my predictions and a betting show. So you want to make a bet, have to talk to the powers that be about getting some backgrounds built, getting some overlays built, sort of how much content they want me pumping out in week 1 and going forward. Hopefully we put that out this week. Get you sort of introduced to me, up to speed with what I'm going to be doing, so that when we hit next week in UFC 280, we're just cruising. We're just running through everything, because that card is amazing. It is packed from top to bottom. It gives us plenty to talk about. And I cannot wait to be back here on the SevereMMA YouTube page, on SevereMMA.com, talking about those fights for all of you. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for checking it out. I hope you enjoyed it. There'll be plenty more from me. We're just getting started. I will get a little more settled. I will be a little less nervous next time. As I said, thanks for tuning in. I am Spencer Kyte, your friendly neighborhood Spencer man. Be good to one another. Take care of yourselves. Enjoy the fights. We'll talk to you soon.